There are so many misunderstandings that are just surrounding and circling around us in society around eating disorders. And this is a very, very dangerous thing for a multitude of reasons. And I'm going to talk about the top 5 misunderstandings that I see on a daily basis regarding eating disorders. But first, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie. I'm Long Island's eating disorder specialist. I post on this channel 3 times a week all about eating disorders, body image issues, and general mental health. So if any of that interests you, please click the subscribe button down below. At the end of the video, if you found it helpful or you liked it, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, I have a blog that I post on weekly and an Instagram account. Feel free to check it out. I will leave those links in the description below. It still to this day shocks me of how many misunderstandings and misrepresentations of eating disorders are out there and how much they're so widely accepted by most of society because they are very, very off base, especially because it's growing and there's a lot more people who are impacted by it and they don't even know it a lot of the times because of the misunderstandings, which is why it's so important to really debunk them, to approach them and just really find out what is true and real, because we need people who are actually suffering from eating disorders who may or may not know that they have it, or maybe those people are being invalidated by others and other people are trying to convince them that they don't actually have an eating issue because of the misunderstandings that we have. We need these people who are suffering in silence or perhaps not knowing that they're suffering. We need them to get help because ultimately it will get worse, and that is something that is harder to treat and it's harder to get better from. Not impossible, but there's so much research that suggests that the earlier an eating disorder is caught and treated, the much better the prognosis. So typically, on average, the earlier you start getting help for your eating disorder, usually you have a lesser likelihood of needing a higher level of care. So more than likely you could probably do it in an outpatient or perhaps an intensive outpatient program. There's a greater likelihood that you don't need as much time in treatment to recover. And of course, that means a lot less money because treatment can be expensive. So obviously we want to get you on your path to recovery very, very quickly. So without further ado, let's get right on into the 5 misunderstandings I'm going to talk about surrounding eating disorders. Number 1, you do not, I repeat, do not have to be underweight to have an eating disorder. This is perhaps the most widely accepted belief about eating disorders, and it's just not true. First off, there are that would really be very limiting to what eating disorder a person may have. But even so, a person with eating disorders that typically are construed as people who lose a lot of weight or are underweight, usually that's more associated in society's eyes with anorexia. However, it is actually very, very possible for someone to be considered medically overweight yet still be diagnosed with anorexia. So what the real issue is that this is a mental health issue. And yes, ultimately and usually you will have physical consequences. However, that doesn't necessarily equate to, the more you have your eating disorder, the more weight you lose or the more you are underweight. That's not necessarily what happens, but eating disorders are mental health disorders. That is what it comes down to. So regardless of the physical consequences that occur or do not occur, it still is the eating disorder because, for the 3rd time, it is a mental health issue. This is perhaps one of the most dangerous misconceptions about eating disorders because the majority of people who are suffering with anorexia actually are not necessarily considered underweight. So the reason that a lot of these people may not be getting help is because they don't even realize that, one, they have an eating disorder, or that famous idea that they're not sick enough. I did a whole video on this. I'll leave that in the description below. But this idea that you're not sick enough, this idea that you're not sick enough because you don't look the part, that you don't look the part in general because you feel that you need to look a certain way in order to have anorexia or to have any type of eating disorder. That is simply not true. Misunderstanding number 2, that eating disorders is really just a ploy to lose weight. As I said before, yes, there may or may not be physical consequences. Usually with the eating disorder continuing on, you will have some sort of physical consequences. Again, not necessarily weight. However, a lot of people think that, oh, it's just a matter of losing weight. Oh, you just, they just diet, just don't eat carbs, don't do this. All these wacky and like pieces of advice that people with eating disorders actually get. It just goes beyond the scope of an eating disorder. It just is not really taking into account what an eating disorder is. So, while there might be a component that the person has an intense fear of gaining weight and does have a desire to lose weight, it stems so much deeper than that. Some people, may start off with a diet, and that might seem to be about losing weight or wanting to lose weight. However, it develops more into an eating disorder. And the thing is that usually that is just a coping skill, that perhaps they're attempting to control their food, control their weight in terms of food, or by using food in order to do so. However, again, that is a coping skill. We all try to use coping skills to feel better about whatever we're suffering with in life. Sometimes we go to healthy coping skills like journaling, yoga, bike riding, all those lovely things. Sometimes we turn to unhealthy coping skills such as drinking, substance use, or using eating as a thing of control, or as a source of comfort. So, in this case, you may turn to food in whatever way in order to cope with whatever you're dealing with. Of course, then it stems into its own eating disorder. Again, I did a whole video about how eating disorders develop, and it really is just kind of a coping skill that occurs. But it's really, really important to know that at the surface it may appear that it's about weight, but it goes way deeper than all of that. Misunderstanding number 3, eating disorders can be reasoned with. So, let me explain that a little bit further. Many people, if you have not been through an eating disorder, it is incredibly difficult to understand what goes on in the mind of an eating disorder. Because the thing is, when a person has an eating disorder, that eating disorder voice is incredibly illogical. Yes, you might, when they're talking to you through why they're doing certain things that they're doing, and you might be looking at them like, what on earth are you even talking about? That makes no sense. However, they might even recognize that it doesn't make any sense, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean something to them. That even though they can incredibly say that I understand that this is my eating disorder voice, I understand that this makes absolutely no sense logically. However, it's something that I just feel to my core that I need to adhere by. And it makes it very, very difficult to reason with, so to speak. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you're getting the proper help, because a person who works with eating disorders, a therapist who works with eating disorders, can actually challenge that in ways that are helpful and will move the person forward, as opposed to keeping them, just kind of in the same boat, where it's very frustrating for others around them to understand what they're going through. Misunderstanding number 4. Eating disorders have a simple solution. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that people around them to say, oh, you know what, to your eating disorder, just eat. Or just stop eating, as though it was that simple. If it was that simple, 1, I'd be out of a job. There would be no need for what I do. 2, there would be no more eating disorders in general. The damage with this is because when you feel that people don't understand you, and you can understand logically that maybe they don't understand what you're going through, but when you feel that people around you who you love and respect and care about are thinking that you're just doing this for God knows what reason, but it's a simple solution and all you need to do is just start eating or just stop eating, then it makes you feel like almost something's wrong with you. That, wow, okay, well, if it's that easy, what the hell am I doing? Why can't I do it? Why can't I just start eating? Why can't I just stop eating? Why can't I do it? And then this is a whole other thing that starts to develop, that you feel that something is wrong with you, and that it makes you even harder on yourself. And again, that's not helpful for recovery, that it will keep you sick. So if you are knowing someone who might be suffering from an eating disorder and you're just a loved one of that person, try not to say those types of things that are so simplistic, because it is not simple by any means. And now, misunderstanding number 5, my last misunderstanding for this particular video, is that eating disorders can be treated as though it was any other mental health issue. So this is a widespread misunderstanding. Even people in the mental health world think that eating disorders could be treated just like any other type of disorder. However, it is really not the case. Eating disorders does require, specialized training, specialized education, and those types of things to really understand what a person is going through who has an eating disorder, how to treat it properly. I've heard so many of my clients who have come in prior and seen therapists prior who did not work with eating disorders, and they've actually said that they are in a worse position than before they started their treatment journey. And it's by no fault of the treatment professionals. Like I said, it is a widespread misunderstanding, and it's very poorly, construed or communicated to people in the mental health world. So if you're not really looking at in this direction, seeing that eating disorders do require a specialization, you don't even realize it. And unfortunately, a lot of therapists will say that they treat eating disorders because of this misunderstanding. And when I said earlier that some people might give quick pieces of advice, such as like just stop eating carbs or stuff like that, that is stuff that is very, very detrimental for a person with an eating disorder. And I have heard people who are therapists start saying that because they don't know how to properly treat an eating disorder. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade on those people. I understand that they don't know that it does require a specialty, but it really does require specialty, sensitivity in a very specific way. And you might feel that as a treatment professional that you're not really doing any harm, but with an eating disorder, it will just run rampant. So with that said, I want to really emphasize that if you are suffering with an eating disorder, I know I say this so often, but if you feel that you're suffering in any way, shape, or form, find the proper help. You need to find a therapist who works specifically with eating disorders. I will leave a link in the description below. I'll put a card also about how to find, my guide at least, how to find a therapist that specializes in the treatment of eating disorders, because there's a lot to kind of sort through to really make sure that you're getting the proper help. And I'll help you with that process in those guides that I have. I have a blog post and or a video, so whatever floats your boat, there you go. So maybe you already knew these things, perhaps you didn't. Either way, I really hope that you found and you learned something new from this video. It is really important, and I cannot emphasize it enough, how much we need to spread our awareness about eating disorders. That is the entire purpose of my channel. Is really just getting to the bottom of everything, increasing awareness and increasing the state of balance in our lives if we are suffering with an eating disorder, or really just anything for that matter. We really need to, we go to such extremes in society with so many different things. We need to get to the center. We need to get to our state of balance. If you learned anything from this video, leave a comment down below about what misunderstanding perhaps you were unaware of, or that you have witnessed other people be unaware of. You can click my face over here to subscribe to my channel, and I wish you awareness and understanding on your journey to finding your state of balance. I will see you in my next video.